Paul Sabo here with GospelProof.com. Got a new video for us today. I'm kind of itching to put this one out since I saw the video. I'm debunking one of Inspiring Philosophy's videos. The video was called "The Bible Does Not Teach a Young Earth," and it supposedly contains the top 10 biblical problems for a young Earth creationist. Now, the Inspiring Philosophy, I can't remember his name. I heard it in some other videos. I've saw him in debates and stuff. I can't remember his name, so out of all due respect for him, I'm just going to call him the IP guy. Rather than just call him Inspiring Philosophy. I saw a lot of his videos before, and I didn't realize he's a gap creationist. And he put some good stuff out. I thought he was a, good Christian. I saw a couple of his videos, but then I couldn't believe it. A lot of stuff started going different ways with, his videos, and I was like, whoa. And then I saw this, and then I realized that that's what it is. He's a gap creationist. Now, a gap creationist, Bible believers, Christians, believe that God created the world in 7 days. In 6 days, and he rested on the seventh day. Well, gap creationists, they think that each day in the Bible meant thousands or millions of years, kind of like when you say back in the day. And it's, I don't know, they come up with these reasons that, and the Bible so clearly says what it means. And but the thing is back when everybody decided saying that the world was millions of years old, the Bible didn't fit in with that, because the Bible says, according to, you add up all the dates, it's about 6,000 years old. And so they had to, wow, this don't add up. So what they do, this is how they did it. They put the gap theory, it's called, to where they put parts in the Bible that have nothing to do with the original scriptures, and I think personally it's ridiculous. But they call these gap creationists, they call anyone, regular Christians that believe the Bible for as it is written, they call us young Earth creationists, which I don't understand why. I mean, the world is, 6,000 years old. I mean, that's not young. I mean, it was 520 years ago when America was discovered. I mean, it's not to say it's millions of years old. That's like a dream. I mean, that's not, it's ridiculous. I don't think they understand, how long that is. I mean, check out on GospelProof.com. I got, Ken O'Vine has a good creation seminar, 7 or 8 video set. I have it all streaming on GospelProof.com. Actually, it's video number 1 has to do with the age of the earth. I strongly suggest checking that out. There's a lot of proof in there. A lot of real proof on how the world couldn't possibly be millions of years old. They always say it that way too. It's millions of years old. That's why I said it's 6,000 years old. But basically what they're doing is they try to mix two religions. They take Christianity and they try to mix it with evolution, which evolution is a religion. I mean, you have to believe it. I mean, there's no proof for evolution. It's a theory. And over time, that's something else. I have a page on there that shows a lot of videos on gospelproof.com about that, on proof that evolution is fake. You can't prove it's real, but it's real easy to prove it's fake. There's been so many things that have been put in textbooks and stuff that has been proven a long time ago to be, they would actually tape bugs on tree bark and stuff and take pictures of it to try to prove evolution. They took bones from different animals and tried to say they were, just all kinds of false stuff. I mean, they really want us to believe in that because, well, they don't want us to believe, otherwise God would be the creator, and they don't want us to believe that for some reason. But anyway, so they mix Christianity with evolution, and they just don't mix. It's like oil and water, but they try. Any Christian should take the Bible literally. like
I
this.
have a question for Ken on Genesis 2. Do you take the entire chapter of Genesis 2 literally?
Absolutely.
I like that part of the video. But, I do this with Christian Love. I'm not trying to pick on the IP guy. I pray for him. I wish he could see, the truth. I mean, part of being a Christian is we're open, to understand Scripture, and those that want to reject the truth, God blinds them, and it's you'll see through this video as I debunk it, and it wasn't hard for me to do. Uh, I knew because I've saw so many times people have tried to show that the Bible has errors in it, and it's never once been proven to have an error. All it is people who don't understand the Bible, uh, and that's the way the Bible. It's supposed to be like that. That's why Jesus spoke in parables to some people, and only others did he. Like the apostles did he open their eyes, to where they could see and stuff. You'll see what I'm talking about when you see how I debunk this video. When you listen to what he says, you're going to totally believe that, wow, that's got to be true. But then let me show you what's really going on with it, and you'll understand the truth. So, enough on that. Let's see the video. Here's the first part.
If you haven't heard, there are millions of people today who believe the earth is only about 6,000 years old. And about 4,000 years ago, there was a worldwide flood that destroyed all life on land, except for a few people and 2 of every animal that survived in an ark. The basis of this theory comes from many who say we ought to take a literal or plain reading of the Bible, the holy book of Christianity. The rationale behind this young earth view is that they are just taking the plain reading of the text, and that Christians who believe the earth is old have to misconstrue or reinterpret passages to make the Bible fit with an ancient earth and the theory of evolution. But what many young earth creationists don't realize is that there are several passages within the Bible itself that create problems for the young earth theory. Meaning if we took the plain reading of the text in many places, it would actually contradict the view that the earth and the universe are only about 6,000 years old. These are the top 10 biblical passages that create problems for the young earth theory. Number 10, Genesis 17:17. Genesis recounts the story of Abraham and Sarah, who were old in age and had no children of their own. God appears to Abraham and says he will have a son in his old age, and then in Genesis 17 it reads, "Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" So Abraham thinks it's biologically impossible for someone past the age of 100 to have a child. But this seems to contradict the ages of his ancestors, also known as the early patriarchs, who were supposed to live for hundreds of years and have children in their old ages. According to the Masoretic dates, many of Abraham's ancestors were supposed to be alive when God made this promise to Abraham in his 100th year, and his ancestor Eber supposedly outlived him. So shouldn't Abraham's reply to God have been that many people alive are having children in their old ages? So having a child at the age of 100 is perfectly normal. More importantly is the fact that based on what Genesis 12 says, Abraham's own father Terah would have had to have fathered Abraham at his own age of 130. So shouldn't Abraham's reply to God have been that having a child past the age of 100 is perfectly normal? After all, his own father had him when he was 130.
Hold on. I'm not sure how he come up with that. His dad was 70 when he had Abraham, not 130. It even shows, if you look at the graph he put on there, it shows in the red there, the first section, it shows the numbers they were when they had the people. Here, take a look. See what I mean? So I don't know what he's talking about there is either, because his dad was not 130 years old, it was only 70. So move on.
The whole episode in Genesis 17 implies Abraham didn't know of anyone, his own father included, who had a child past the age of 100. And this would imply that when Genesis assigns high ages to the patriarchs, it is probably not their literal ages, but symbolic numbers for theological messaging. And that would mean Genesis doesn't give us a literal chronology back to the creation of Adam, damaging the young earth creationist view that the Bible documents through the ages of the patriarchs that the earth is only 6,000 years old.
Okay, now in Genesis 17:17, it says, Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, Should a child be born of a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? Well, I could easily say why he would have said that, because if you look at his graph, you will see that the last 8 generations of people were in their 30s, except for his father, who was 70, but that was actually old. But there's a big difference between 70 and 100, and for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations before that, they were all in their 30s or 20s. So what's he talking about? He's mixing in 10 generations ago, which was before the flood, which they said he was going to change everything after the flood. So I don't know what he's talking about. It doesn't make any sense. Let's go on.
Number 9. Genesis 8. A common view among young earth believers is the idea that the earth was covered in a global flood about 4,000 years ago. When Genesis records that God flooded the earth, it should be understood as literally the entire globe, because it says the waters covered the face of the whole earth. But there is a problem for this view within Genesis 8. Verses 4 and 5 say the ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat or Aratu, and the tops of the mountains could be seen at this point. However, later in the chapter, Noah releases a dove, and it returns to him because the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. But didn't verse 5 say the tops of the mountains were seen? So verse 9 cannot mean the waters were literally covering the whole earth, implying the entire flood account might be hyperbolic in its description of the flood, and this would mean it was not literally covering the entire globe, but just a regional area. This is also supported by verse 13, where it says the waters dried from the earth. But this obviously cannot literally mean the entire globe, since most of the surface of the earth is still covered by water. So it appears the flood account is describing the flood hyperbolically. It doesn't necessarily teach the entire globe was covered.
Okay, first of all on this, nowhere, I don't see how he could say that anything he's saying about this shows that it wasn't over the whole world. I mean, it says multiple times in the Bible that it was the whole world, and what he's showing about this wouldn't prove anything that it wasn't the whole world, first of all. But second of all, in Genesis chapter 8, verse 9, it specifically says that the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, so returned to the ark. Now, think about it. I understand that in chapter 8, verse 5, it says that only that the tops of the mountains were shown. But you think about this now. The whole world is covered with water. Okay, now, IP guy, he's trying to say that the earth wasn't covered with water because it said the tops of the mountains were saw. Well, now, I argue on that. I'll tell you why. Let's think about this. Now, the whole world's covered with water. Now, how tall is a mountain? An average mountain is 1,000 foot tall. So, here's the earth. You have 1,000 foot deep of water, and the top of a mountain is sticking out. Now, you're going to say that means that the whole earth isn't covered with water. The whole earth is 1,000 foot underwater. You got trees, which is normally what birds land on. They're like 100 foot tall. So you're like 850 feet of water above the trees the whole world covers. And the tip of the mountain is out. Now you imagine the whole world, it was a big storm. The whole world is covered with water, except for the tips of this mountain. Now, a little bird gets out of this boat. You know them waves this water is at least 1,000 foot deep. 1,000 foot deep of water that has nowhere for the waves to stop. It's just nonstop all over the darn place. And he's going to say, well, that bird could have landed on the tip of that mountain. That bird wasn't going to land on the tip of that mountain. I'm sorry. That makes perfect sense to me. I don't know what you're talking about. And that has nothing to do with, and it specifically said, meaning, that the trees weren't done yet. I'm sure is what he meant, because it said nowhere for, it specifically said the sole of her foot, meaning the trees were 850 feet underwater. I'm sure that could make sense. And if you're trying to say that's your proof that the world is 1,000,000 years old, you're going to have to wake up earlier in the morning than that. I am sorry. Let's move on.
Number 8, Genesis 2:24. Young Earth creationists are often proud of the fact, and almost go so far as to brag, that they just take the plain reading of Scripture and don't have to reinterpret anything. In my debate with Kent Hovind, I asked if he takes all of Genesis 1 and 2 literally, and he replied, I have a question for Kent on Genesis 2. Do you take the entire chapter of Genesis 2 literally?
Absolutely.
But this is actually impossible, because Genesis 2:24 cannot be understood literally. After Adam is introduced to Eve, it reads, Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Since married couples are not sewn together, this obviously cannot be understood as literal. Some young earth believers try to get around this by saying it's a reference to procreation and the act of making children. But that would mean they interpret the phrase becoming one flesh metaphorically to mean having offspring, since the text does not literally say to make children. Verse 24 is obviously metaphorical language, but that means the text of Genesis 1 and 2 could also be using other metaphors. It was not meant to be entirely literal.
I'll tell you, these evolutionists are so good at twisting stuff to try to prove a point. When just because they say it makes a point, you just assume it does the way they do it. They'd be good at selling used cars, I'll tell you. First of all, everything he's saying there has nothing to do with how it's going to prove that the world is 1,000,000 years old. He just, well, this is what it must mean. So you're supposed to say, yeah, that's what it means. Whatever. First of all, Genesis 2:24, Genesis 2:24 and 25. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, and man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Now, I think it's obvious what he's talking about here, as far as having children. But to say that they're going to become one flesh, isn't that what really happens? I mean, what is more literal? To say when someone's producing a baby that, they're going to end up, it's going to become one flesh, both of them combined into one. He's saying making babies is not literal, or is literal. He's saying making babies is literal. I wish I was a cartoonist. I'd love to make a cartoon to put in right here where you see a man and his wife sitting there with a box of body parts. And, honey, pass me a leg. Okay, here's an arm. And we're making a baby. Our English language is filled with stuff like that. And just because we say it all the time doesn't mean that's literal. This is a long time ago. And God was speaking professionally, I would say. And I would say that is more literal than making babies. You know what I'm saying? So, again, they twist this stuff around, and then he's trying to say that since that's not literal, then the world must be 1,000,000 years old. Whatever. That's ridiculous that they even, it's just amazing, simply amazing. Like, they think their viewers are that stupid, first of all, and this is their major points. This is such a problem. The Bible can't be right. I can't, it's literal. I can't believe, I'll tell you, I don't know if they're literally that blinded, because God will blind the unbelievers, I don't know if they're that blinded or that stupid, but it's something. It's one of the two. Because if you look at it with a clean slate and just pay attention, it's obvious. It's just so obvious. I mean, so obvious. Let's move on.
Number 7, Genesis 3:22. Genesis 3 recounts the fall of Adam and Eve in the exile from the Garden of Eden. Young Earth creationists believe before this there was no death, because God made everything perfect. So Adam and Eve would had to have been created immortal, and the fall resulted in their bodies being made mortal, and consequently, death came as a result. However, Genesis 3 never says their bodies were changed or transformed to be mortal. God curses the ground, but never places any curse on their bodies. In fact, all he does is bar them from the tree of life. Verse 22 reads, "Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. Now lest he reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat, and live forever." The implication numerous scholars have pointed out is Adam and Eve were already mortal, and the only way they obtained immortality in the garden was eating continuously from the tree of life. To make them mortal again, all God had to do was prevent access to this sacred tree. But that means humans were already mortal before the fall, and were only granted immortality through a special fruit, not because they were created with immortal bodies. This is also supported by the fact that Adam is called dust, which is an idiom in the Bible to denote that one is mortal. In Genesis, it might just be metaphorical language to denote that he was a mortal human, meaning Adam was mortal before the fall, which implies that death was a possibility before sin entered.
Okay, on this one, you're going to have to pay close attention. Again, this is what they do. They twist everything up. But what he's saying here, I don't want to have to I'd have to stop the video after every single thing he said and re-explain it all. And it'd take an hour just to do this number 7 on Genesis 3:22. And I don't want to do that. So just pay attention to what I'm saying here. Now, Christians believe that before the fall, everything was perfect with the earth. Okay? And God is originally intended for us to live forever on earth in our human body. Okay? Now, after the fall, God cursed the earth. No, he didn't curse the body. True. Okay? But he took away the tree of life. That way we could no longer live in our body forever. Okay? Now, what he's not understanding is that our soul lives forever. The body doesn't need to be cursed. The Bible has never said anything good at all about the human body. The human body is basically already cursed. It's garbage. Makes you sin. It's no good. You really did us a favor, but I'm just telling you the way it is. Why would he take away the tree of life if the body didn't need it before the fall? Why even have the tree of life? But we weren't saying that. That's the thing. He's putting words in our mouth. What he don't understand is he's trying to combine living forever in the soul with the Spirit of God compared to living in the body. And that's a pretty simple part of the Bible if you've read the Bible, but for some reason he doesn't understand that. Or if he does understand it, then he's either lying or stupid, one of the two. So I don't know. But basically, before the fall, everything with the earth was perfect. And we had the tree of life. After the fall, God cursed the land, and he took away our tree of life. That way, we would not live forever on earth. We would die. However, our souls would go to either heaven or hell, which had a lot to do with the sinning. But that's later on in the book. But that's all that's being said here. It's really simple. He just twists it all up and I don't know if he doesn't understand the difference between a soul living forever and the body dying, or I don't know if you don't get that. He's either lying or stupid. So it's one of the two. But this is all real simple. And he answered all his own questions right there throughout the video, but he was just trying to mix it up in ways to make it look complicated. And then in the end, after he mixed it all up and shook it all up, he said, "See, the world can't be only 6,000 years old." I don't know, ridiculous like the rest of this. This whole thing wasn't really that difficult. He's just trying to, I don't know, that's what the evolutionists do. Let's move on.
Number 6. Genesis 2:4. Young Earth creationists often argue that Genesis 2 is a recap of what takes place on day 6 within Genesis 1, when God made humans. But Genesis 2:4 poses a problem for suggesting this chapter is a recap. The verse begins with, "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created." This is what scholars call a toledoth, and it is used throughout Genesis, almost like chapter markers for the ancient audience. However, when this phrase is used, it always introduces what comes after the person or the generations that follow him. It is never used to denote a recap of something that happened prior to this. Biblical scholar John Walton notes that the phrase in Genesis 2 is probably teaching the same idea, and that what takes place in Genesis 2 is meant to be a sequel, not a recap of what happens in Genesis 1. After God establishes the cosmos, he then hones in on one region on the earth to create a garden environment. But this would mean what is commonly viewed as the creation of the first man in Genesis 2 is not actually the creation of the first man. Since in the prequel to Genesis 2, God elects all humans to be his image, and this would take place before Genesis 2 and before Adam is believed to have been created from dust. Scholars like Michael Heiser note Genesis 1 speaks of encompassing all of humanity, not just one man or one couple, implying when God made man in his image, it was meant to include all humans, wherever they were existing at that time. Then Genesis 2 picks up after this with the creation or election of two specific individuals to act as priests in the Garden of Eden. So because of the Toledoth in Genesis 2, the implication is Adam came after, when all humanity was made in the image of God, and therefore was not the first human.
Okay, here we go. Again, this is just ridiculous. Now you take Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. Okay, it says, and these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now, that didn't start the chapter. Notice it's chapter 2, verse 4. It's not chapter 2, verse 1, like normally when they do those teledoths. And also, just like all the other teledoths, he said, these are the generations of the heavens and the earths. And then he talked to that after of what happened on that day. You know, it's like just like the other ones, so it's no different. The only difference is that they finished up the previous day before he went into this one, which to me makes it more than obvious that he's going to recap it, because he didn't start it on a different day, and even if he did, I mean, on a different chapter, he didn't start on a different chapter. I mean, he finished talking about his seventh day, and then he okay, we're done talking about all 7 of the days, so now let's recap the second one and bring it into more detail. He's talked about the same thing more than once. He usually does it like 3 times a lot of times. Many of the major things he wanted to do for proofs throughout the Bible, just like, I mean, you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Were those, was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were they all in a different, like, was it Mark followed Jesus and then 1,000 years later, then Luke did, and then, another 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years later, then John came along and he followed Jesus, and wow, it was real similar. Come on. That's what I'm saying. They're trying to twist stuff. I don't even know how they come up with this stuff. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's why I do believe it's inspired by Satan, because I couldn't see how I don't know how anybody could even come up with this. I mean, it's just simply ridiculous, but I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's so obvious. You know what I mean? What they're talking about. I mean, in how they worded it and everything, that they're individual days, and it was obvious the way they set it up with the structure. He finished up, he talked about them all, then he finished up talking about the seventh one, and then he's like, okay, you know, then he even said, it's like obvious. It's obvious a recap. I mean, for them to even say that, and then they say, well, if it was a recap, well, then this maybe could have happened, and this maybe could have been like this, and this could have maybe been like this. And if all that was like that, then the world would be millions of years old. Come on. I mean, where'd you come up with this stuff at? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, you should be ashamed. This is a Bible you're doing this to, for real. I mean, for real. I'm glad I'm not you. For real. That's ridiculous. Move on. I do it with Christian love, but it makes me mad. It really does. I mean, it's like, I don't know. They're trying to teach this stuff to kids, I mean, they're telling kids, no, don't listen to that Bible. Believe this instead. It's like, it's ridiculous. It really is. Let's move on.
Number 5. Jeremiah 4:23 to 26. Young Earth creationists often assert that Genesis 1 cannot be read to mean anything other than a literal 6-day creation of the cosmos. When theistic evolutionists interpret it to mean something else, they are reading that into the text. But it seems the prophet Jeremiah used very similar language from Genesis 1 to metaphorically describe the fallen northern kingdom of Israel. In Jeremiah 4, the prophet is warning Judah that they will be desolated like the northern kingdom if they do not repent, and in doing so, he described what happened in northern Israel by heavily borrowing from Genesis 1. He says northern Israel is now formless and void. There is no light, no man, no birds of the air, and no vegetation. Even the very conservative scholar, John MacArthur, acknowledges the language was taken from Genesis 1 and is used in reverse to speak of what happened in northern Israel. But this language does not mean the fabric of space-time opened up and sucked out the land of the northern kingdom. The sun was still literally shining on the region. There were still humans, and there is no reason to believe birds refused to fly over the area or that no plants grew. Jeremiah is simply using this language to metaphorically say the northern kingdom no longer functions properly. But if the same language is used in reverse in Genesis 1, that implies all it is saying is God took a disordered cosmos and made it function properly for human civilizations to begin. Thus, within the scriptures itself, the implication is the language of Genesis 1 does not mean literal material creation, and therefore does not necessarily refer to a literal 6-day creation.
I'll tell you what, this number 5, evolutionists do this all the time. This is just a bunch of what ifs. I mean, there's no way to prove nothing on that. I mean, and that's what they do. They're like, well, can you prove that this isn't true? And if you say no, they say, well, then it must be true. Well, can you prove it is true? No. But they don't want to talk about that. So that's just a bunch of what ifs. You know what I mean? And then they put up a big story about it and they say, see, that maybe could be, if it maybe possibly was like that, the world would be millions of years old. That don't mean nothing. It would have been better off for them to say the top 9 things that affected creationists than to even put that one in there. That's just ridiculous. A waste of time.
Number 4, Genesis 1:14 to 19. The most popular objection used against young Earth creationism is the fact that nights and days exist before the sun, which is created on day 4. Days and nights cannot exist without the Earth rotating and moving around the sun. Young Earth believers often reply by suggesting maybe there was another light source, or they will argue that God made the light on day 1 and then gathered it together into the sun on day 4. But this seems unlikely, since Genesis 1 talks about the sun and the moon being created together as lights, and the composition of the moon is not the same as the sun. You cannot gather light together to make the moon. It only reflects light from the sun. Also, you just cannot separate the sun into pieces and have the same resulting chemistry necessary to provide sunlight for plants, supposedly created on day 3. This whole response from young Earth creationists is simply contrived and ad hoc. A more likely explanation is the sun and moon are just elected to serve as signs for seasons and for days and years, instead of being materially created. And this is what Genesis 1 is actually saying.
Another, again, this guy's getting desperate, man, for real. He's starting to come up with stuff. He's like, man, I said I'd do 10. I know, come on, I got to come up with something here. It's almost midnight. I'm supposed to work in the morning. I got 3 more to go. Let's see, what can we do here? All right, let's see. Well, God couldn't, he didn't know what day it was without the sun and stuff, so how could he do that? And, well, God couldn't see without the sun, so how did he build everything in the dark? I mean, come on, really? Let's see, John 8:12, John 12:46. 1 John 1:5, Psalms 27:1, 1 John 1:7, John 9:5, Matthew 17:2. I could go on. Jesus and God was the light. They were the light. Give me a break. Really? Again, maybe it would have been better to say that it was the top 8 things that creationists needed. It would have been better than even waste our times with this. I mean, for real. That's just funny.
Number 3. Genesis 1:28. As noted before, young earth believers say before the fall, the earth was blissful and perfect, with no death or suffering. But Genesis 1:28 suggests the opposite was true. Humanity is told to subdue the earth and have dominion over all animals. In Hebrew, these words are extremely harsh. The first word is used of war conquest and enslavement. The second word refers to ruling harshly over someone, or oppression. So God is telling humans to make a warlike conquest on the earth because it needs subdued, implying the earth wasn't perfect, and humanity was elected to transform the earth into a better place. But to do that meant tackling the harsh environments forcefully. The scholar Joshua John Van E notes the use of this second word for ruling over the animals seems to suggest humans had the right to use animals for any purpose, like food and clothing, implying they already had the right to kill and eat animals. But this means the command from God implies the earth was not a perfect, blissful creation. Instead, this verse implies the earth was chaotic and needed order brought to it. Also, humans seem to be given the right to kill animals, implying death was already in existence.
I told you he's getting desperate now. I mean, the world's got to be 1,000,000 years old. I mean, the earth couldn't have been perfect. Come on. Was there any house trees anywhere? Did you see any Chevy truck trees or anything like that? I mean, we had to do stuff. I mean, it isn't like, come on. The earth wasn't perfect. They said it was perfect. They shouldn't have to do anything to it or do anything. And then, well, they must have been eating animals back then, since that word there means warlike conquerors on animals. Well, I didn't notice any winter coat trees anywhere, or did you notice any sandal trees? Or let me go over there and pick a couple come on, a couple tennis shoes off the, come on. It's ridiculous. No, we were never going to advance on anything. Otherwise, it wasn't perfect. The world was definitely a gazillion years old. You can tell because of this. This is ridiculous. I mean, it's like, okay, how about this? Guy went over, he grabbed the tree, and he pulled it, and he ripped that tree apart. And then he took a rock, and he pounded it against that rock, and he started going like this in a warlike structure, and he sharpened the rock. And then he went over to a bunch of weeds, and he ripped them out of the ground, right? And then he laid them out in the sun. He didn't give them no water all day till they dried out. And when they dried out, he tied the rock to the tree, to the rock on there, took them dried things, made an axe or a hatchet. He took the hatchet, went over to an animal, whacked him right in the head, and made a coat. Ha! Come on, really? Again, wasting our time around here. This is ridiculous. I hope they're not going to call this stuff science. The world's got to be 1,000,000 years old. Give me a break. You guys are desperate as could be. The Bible can't be true.
Number 2,
What a
Bara.
joke.
Number 2 is not so much a passage, but the use of a Hebrew word. Many young earth creationists believe this word refers to God creating out of nothing, and it is used frequently throughout Genesis 1. But looking at how the word is used outside of Genesis 1 implies bara doesn't necessarily mean creation out of nothing. It might not even refer to material creation at all. John Walton has done a full semantic analysis on the word, and he points out the word never necessarily means creation out of nothing, and there are several times it cannot mean that. In Psalm 51, the author uses Bara to ask God to make a new clean heart within him. This obviously doesn't refer to the creation of a new material heart out of nothing. In Isaiah 65, it refers to electing Jerusalem to be a place of joy. In Isaiah 43, it refers to creating the nation of Israel, which came about over time and through natural processes. In Ezekiel 21, it refers to making a sign. It is even used to refer to David not eating food. There are times it could refer to material creation out of nothing, but it never necessarily does, and there are clear examples where Bara cannot refer to material creation. So there is no reason to assume that that is the meaning in Genesis 1, especially given the previous problems that we have gone over. Kenneth Matthews notes Bara more likely refers to bringing about activity rather than material manufacturing, implying Genesis 1 is not about material creation.
Number 2, he's only got 2 more to come up with, and he is getting desperate, folks. Let me tell you, he is getting desperate. Bara. Well, I looked up in Nas Old Testament Hebrew lexicon, and it had 53 different ways for the word to be used, actually. And, it still doesn't make sense. It basically means to create, Just because to create out of nothing, well, it's a verb. To create. It has to complement a noun. Nothing. Or from the, I don't know. It just don't make sense what he's saying. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, just because it was used nowhere else, it don't make sense. That's not a good. That doesn't prove anything. I'm sorry, it don't prove nothing. It means nothing. That just doesn't make sense. It don't make sense. Sorry.
Now finally, number 1, Genesis 1, verse 1. This may come as a shock to you, but the very first verse of the Bible can create difficulties for young Earth models. The reason is, over the past few decades, scholars have noted the first verse lacks a definite article in Hebrew, so the way we translate it may not be accurate. Instead, scholars like John Salhammer and Robert Homestead have argued it would make more sense to translate it as, when God began to create the heavens and the earth. What this would mean is verse 1 is no longer a complete sentence, but what we would call a dependent clause in an incomplete sentence. So this would mean verse 1 is dependent on the following clause, which is in verse 2. So Genesis is really saying, when God began to bara the heavens and the earth was formless and void. In other words, when God started baraing the heavens and the earth, it was already there as formless and void. So many scholars note this implies Genesis 1 is not about bringing the universe and the earth into existence for the first time, but is about God transforming the earth from a chaotic state into an ordered state. If the Hebraic form of verse 1 and 2 implies the earth was already there existing before the creation week, then the text supports an extended period of time prior to this and is not actually stating the absolute beginning point of our universe.
Okay, we're down to last but not least. Actually, it's the last and the least. He probably was like, man, I need to get to bed. This one here is just, again, it's like ridiculous. I mean, there's no way to prove it wrong, right or wrong. I mean, because, I ain't saying there's no way to prove it wrong. It's all I can say is the Bible says what it says. And he's just saying a but and one shift. First of all, he started off saying, well, this may not be accurate. And then he just starts saying, it really says this. Well, no. You're saying it may not be accurate, which translates to it may say this, which basically leads us right back to what the evolutionists love to do. When they're all done twisting things all around, they look at you and say, can you prove I'm wrong? And if you can't prove I'm wrong, they say, see that? I'm right. It's really ridiculous. It's a shame. I'll tell you, I'm joking around, have fun with it all. But I make this video with Christian love. I really do. And inspiring philosophy, IP guy, he's a brilliant guy, he's a smart guy, and he's good with the Bible. He really is in a lot of ways. I saw a lot of his videos, and I really wish he'd open his eyes, I don't know, and just see the truth, because I can't let it slide. I mean, this evolution is one of the devil's largest, greatest tools, and as it starts off, starts off with kids, and by the time they get to college, it's taken so many people, that were faithful believers, and evolution will turn them from God, and you can't say I am a Christian, but I'm going to support evolution that rips kids away from believing in Jesus and God. I don't care. And this is no more proof. Anything he said right here ain't no more proof than the proof of evolution. It's all a joke. And that there I say strongly and seriously. But, I mean, I do. I pray. I mean, Father, please, Father, open his eyes, open people's eyes. Let them see the truth. And don't let, just because they fall for Satan's tricks and stuff and they're blinded, I wish they would just have their eyes open so they could see the truth, because this is just ridiculous, it really is. It's a shame. It really is. But I hope you all enjoyed watching the video. I hope you can at least see, you may have to listen to what I said and then watch what he said again to kind of, I didn't want to cut up his video in a million pieces and say everything right there. So I let him talk, and then I just kind of tried to make my statement. But if you take into consideration what I'm saying, I'm sure you can see that all I did was twist a bunch of stuff apart, and he tried to confuse you with it, and he tried to twist it in ways, and he played with his wording, and he tried to make you say something it didn't. And in the end, he said, see that? That means the world's old, millions and billions of years old, and that's just not cool. But check out gospelproof.com. I got a lot of videos in there showing more on evolution, how it's fake. And I really do strongly suggest you watching Ken Hovind's creation seminar. I got it on gospelproof.com. I'm streaming them all right there. It's free. Just go in and watch them. Also, a thing he was mentioning there about the flood. I got check out the I can't believe I can't come up with it. The hydroplate theory. Check out the hydroplate theory page on that. That's Walt Brown. Well, yeah. I didn't brush up on I can't remember. It's been a while. I know. Walt Brown. I think it's Walt Brown. It may not be Brown, but it's Walt. I can't remember. I can't believe I don't remember his name, but whatever. Check it out on gospelproof.com. That there, man, I'll tell you, is awesome. Now, that's called a theory, but I'll tell you what, there's more proof on that. If you take what's said in the Bible and compare it to that hydroplate theory, he has taken it, and it matches beautifully, perfect with the Bible. And you'll see how much science really is in the Bible with that hydroplate theory. And I'll tell you, the only reason you can't prove it to be true is because you can't be back there to say it happened. But if you watch that, I promise you will see that there is no way anything else would be possible. Trust me. Check all that on gospelproof.com. That's one of the reasons I put it together. It's not stuff I did. It's some of the best of the best, some of the best of their work to show you proof on how the Bible really is true, word for word, every word. And God is real. He did create this world about 6,000 years ago, and he is the owner. He is the boss, and he does have rules. You better pay attention to the rules because Judgment Day is coming. So, again, Paul Sabo with gospelproof.com. Thanks for watching.